Would you confront the fear of losing your identity, or live in ignorance if something mysterious began altering your life? The conference room hummed with a low, anxious murmur beneath the cold hum of fluorescent lights. Chairs scraped softly against the linoleum as tense figures shuffled papers and exchanged brief, whispered comments. Lena sat stiff-backed at the edge, her petite frame knotted with apprehension beneath a muted pastel blouse, the fabric slightly stretched from countless nights spent wrestling with doubt. Her round glasses caught the flicker of the overhead lights, magnifying the weariness etched beneath dark curly tendrils pulled back in a careless bun. The air was sharp and sterile, tinged with the faint musk of stale coffee and anxiety. Outside, the fading dusk bled through tall windows, casting elongated shadows that bled into the room's cold blues and grays, fragments of a day slipping too fast into night, unraveling order with every second. An urgent voice cut through the low hum. "Lena Smithgold, you step up, please?" The manager's tone was clipped, rehearsed, yet carried a brittle edge that sliced through the soft veil of murmured concerns. Lena's breath caught, fingers clenching the edge of her chair, palms dampening against the cold plastic. She rose cautiously, the room suddenly still gazed like an accusing spotlight centered on her. Her steps echoed tentative, hesitant against the polished floor as she moved to the front. A sharp intake of breath, a whisper threaded with ridicule, rippled among the gathered faces. The manager's eyes hardened a silent signal before the words dropped like stones. "We've uncovered an error in last week's report. A critical miscalculation that led to a significant loss. Lena, would you care to explain how this oversight slipped by you?" The words hung heavy, filled with accusation yet carefully poised to shred her credibility without outright blame. Her pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out the faint hum of a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. She opened her mouth, but the words dissolved into static, swallowed by the cold gleam of myriad eyes seeking her failure, measuring it, savoring it. "No, don't believe that's correct." Her voice trembled, a fragile fortress against the rising tide of humiliation. "I rechecked everything multiple times. Someone else must have made a mistake." A snide chuckle slid from the back of the room, sharp and cruel. Heads nodded, some eyes rolling dismissively. The atmosphere coiled tighter, a snake ready to strike. "Let's be clear." The manager's voice hardened, deliberate and cutting. "The evidence points to you. We expect accountability." The words crystallized, dragging a chill that seeped into Lena's bones. Her glasses fogged slightly, breath hitching as sweat crept along her neck. A soft buzzing began, a subtle, relentless frequency streaking beneath the surface of her senses, mirroring the flicker of the light above that sputtered uncertainly, as if the room itself was unraveling with her. For a moment, her gaze sought the glass pane behind the manager, catching the distorted reflection of herself, the familiar, yet strangely alien face framed by trembling lashes. The world blurred, edges softening, reality threatening to dissolve in the growing shadow of self-doubt. Then, a sudden, harsh glow of red flared from the blinking fire alarm light, casting spastic shadows and deepening the room's coldness. The sound was slow to a mechanical wailing that shattered composed facades. Chaos erupted in a rush of footsteps and murmurs, but Lena stood frozen, caught between collapsing certainty and the dark promise of what lurked unseen in her unraveling mind. Her eyes snapped back to the room, now alive with flickering lights and shifting figures, an endless, unsettling dance where truth and illusion tangled. The camera lingered on Lena's shivering, diminutive frame beneath the fluctuating glare, the stark contrast of blues and fiery reds painting a tableau of fractured reality and fragile identity. As the fire alarm blared, drowning the room in urgent noise, Lena's reflection in the glass twisted into a haunting smile, not hers but someone else's, beckoning, inscrutable. The scene faded to black, leaving the visceral thrum of uncertainty pulsing in the silence, the fear of losing oneself quietly descending. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights above the cramped kitchen was the only sound filtering through the dense fog surrounding Lena's thoughts. The fading blue-gray of twilight seeped around the edges of the drawn curtains, casting long, cold shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. She sat at the kitchen table, her posture taut, shoulders slumped not out of defeat but out of the weight pressing deep in her chest. Her petite form felt smaller somehow, swallowed by the heavy silence of her cramped apartment. Her fingers toyed nervously with the edge of a chipped coffee mug, tracing invisible patterns in the cracked glaze. Outside, the low flicker of street lamps jutted through the darkness, their light wavering like timid promises on the edge of oblivion. The world outside was indifferent, vast, and cold, a stark contrast to the storm churning within Lena's mind. She replayed the meeting again, the way the words had sliced through the stale office air, the pointed looks from colleagues who were quick to assign blame, the sharp sting of her manager's voice echoing in her ears. "Lena, this negligence is on you." But it wasn't hers. Not this time. Still, the room had turned a silent jury condemning her, whispers prickling at the edges of her awareness. The gnawing doubt crept closer, its chill more suffocating than the night's fog outside. Her lips pressed shut against the bitter urge to scream, to protest, to claw back the fragments of dignity slipping through her fingers. Yet the words tangled deep and unruly, her mind a tangle of fractures she struggled to piece together. A flickering shadow caught her eye, the light from the swaying street lamp outside danced over the kitchen window, pinpricks of uneven glow that seemed to mimic the uncertainty threading through her thoughts. The fragile stability she clung to flickered and waned beneath unseen hands. She drew in a shaky breath, the cool air fighting against the tightening knot within her ribs. Her reflection shimmered off the windowpane, a blurred, fractured image she no longer fully recognized. Behind her round glasses, eyes glassy yet burning with hidden fires, Lena glimpsed a truth she tried to disguise even from herself. The abyss was nearer than she had dared admit. Minutes stretched into a suspended silence, broken only when the soft, reassuring patter of her dog's paws approached. Echo's warm presence nudged against her ankle, a grounding force, a tether to a simpler, loyal love untainted by chaos. She reached down slowly, fingers curling around the fur, and for a moment, the storm in her mind quieted as a faint pulse of resilience flickered beneath the despair. The phone vibrated softly on the table, a muted yet persistent reminder of a world beyond this fragile cocoon. The screen glowed with an unknown number, its unanswered call swallowing 1,000 silent pleas. Her eyes lifted from Echo, shifting from the fractured reflection back to the window, where shadows lengthened and the city's pulse throbbed in slow, uneasy beats. The night promised more unspoken fears, but somewhere inside, a fragile ember remained, a stubborn flicker of defiance waiting to ignite. The camera held on Lena's lone figure in the half-lit room, the gentle rise and fall of her chest syncing with the subtle dance of flickering light and deepening dark. And in that tenuous balance, a quiet resolve kindled. The story shimmered on the edge of a whispered transformation. The night had settled into a thick, uneasy silence as Lena stepped outside her apartment building. The air was sharp with the biting chill of early autumn, carrying with it the faint rustle of dying leaves swirling across cracked sidewalks. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, wavering shadows that crept unsettlingly like tendrils reaching into the quiet corners of the dimly lit suburb. Her breath formed ragged clouds in the cold air, dissipating into the darkness where unseen eyes seemed to watch, waiting. With slow, deliberate movements, Lena made her way to the small parking lot where her car rested under the uneven glow of a solitary, sputtering lamp. Each step echoed softly against the pavement as the distant hum of night traffic played out a low, haunting symphony. Her nails scraped nervously against the worn leather of her jacket. She opened the driver's side door and paused, fingers hesitating on the edge of the seat before she bent to retrieve her belongings. Among the scattered papers and the habitual detritus of a busy workday lay a small, folded letter sealed with a faded, crimson stamp. It was tucked between her notebook and a forgotten snack wrapper, worn in a way that suggested it had been there for some time waiting. Her heart skipped, pulse quickening beneath the tension building in her chest. The letter was written in her own handwriting, elegant, flowing, yet eerily unfamiliar. She pulled it free, unfolding the paper carefully, the faint crackling sound almost deafening in the silence. The streetlight flickered again, bathing the letter in a ghostly hue as her eyes scanned lines that seemed to reach into places she didn't know existed inside her. The words were cryptic, fragmented. Whispers of memories she had lost, names she couldn't place, places that felt both distant and hauntingly close. The letter spoke of truths buried deep beneath layers of forgetting, warning of dangers lurking in the twilight of her mind. It was as if the letter was a map drawn in shadows, beckoning her into a labyrinth of her own identity. A sudden gust of wind swept through the parking lot, scattering dry leaves across the ground and slipping inside the open car door. The flickering street lamp above struggled fiercely against the encroaching darkness. Lena's breath caught not from cold, but from the inexplicable shiver that raced down her spine, a mixture of dread and a flicker of defiant curiosity. For a fleeting moment, she caught her reflection in the car's side mirror. The small, fragile woman stared back, her glasses slightly askew, curls loose and uncontrolled, eyes wide and searching. But in that reflection, a shadow lurked, a hint of something else, something beyond the familiar, waiting to be confronted. Her hands tightened around the letter, fingers trembling as the flicker of the streetlight painted her pale skin with sharp contrasts of light and dark. The urban silence stretched, pregnant with possibilities that both terrified and beckoned her forward. The night deepened as she slid into the driver's seat, the worn leather creaking beneath her. At that moment, a subtle transformation began, a shift in the air around her, tangible yet elusive. The familiar world held its breath as Lena's eyes flicked toward the letter once more, determination igniting in their depths. The camera held on the faint glow that pulsed from the fragile paper in her hand, a beacon piercing the oppressive quiet, her first step into the unknown. The streetlight flickered one last time before plunging the frame into darkness, leaving only the whisper of her breathing and the faint, telltale scratch of pen on paper echoing in the void. In that suspended moment, the story poised delicately on the edge of revelation. The journey had begun. The rain fell steadily, drumming a relentless rhythm against the windows of Lena's dimly lit apartment. A pale blue light struggled through the thick clouds, casting muted shadows across the cluttered desk where the first mysterious letter lay open, a dark, cryptic confession written in her own handwriting. Its edges were worn, almost as if it had been handled and hidden away, waiting for the right moment to surface. The cold air seeped in from a cracked window, swirling around the flickering candle she'd lit earlier, a fragile beacon combating the encroaching darkness. Her eyes, magnified behind rounded glasses, darted anxiously between the letter's jagged lines and the reflection in the cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the peeling wall. In it, a woman caught between fear and resolve stared back. For hours, Lena had pored over the fragmented script, deciphering shadows of memories she never recalled. Each sentence hinted at parts of her life that felt alien yet achingly familiar, glimpses of truth lurking beneath layers of forgotten pain. Despite the weight of confusion, a tentative spark of determination stirred, fragile but alive. Her phone buzzed, a sudden jolt in the oppressive silence. She hesitated, fingers trembling before answering. A voice on the other end, tentative and low, offered a clue, a name linked to the letter, a place to start unraveling the mystery. The night deepened, and with it, Lena's resolve. She scribbled notes feverishly, linking the scattered pieces of a hidden puzzle. The air hummed with tension, mixing the sterile smell of ink and rain-soaked earth. Her mind raced, a clash of apprehension and hope. Yet the shadows crept closer, shadows not just of memory but of an unseen observer manipulating the edges of her reality. The lights flickered again, once, twice, plunging the room into brief darkness before reluctant illumination returned. In the flicker, Lena glimpsed the letter's words twisting, shifting, filtering before her eyes. An uneasy silence swallowed the apartment. Lena's breath came sharp and shallow. A creeping paranoia seeped into her bones as she realized this was no ordinary letter, and this was no ordinary struggle. Her voice broke the stillness, barely a whisper. "Who's behind this?" The question hung unanswered as the camera focused on Lena's hands clenched tightly around the letter, the edges crumpled from both desperation and hope. The flickering candle flame, wavering perilously close to extinction, cast long, eerie shadows mirroring the unstable boundaries of truth and illusion twisting around her. Outside, the rain intensified, streaking against the glass, blurring the world beyond into an indistinct haze. The city beneath held its breath, and so did Lena, poised at the precipice of discovery and deeper unknowns. The scene faded slowly, leaving only the soft, persistent tapping of rain and the trembling light, a suspenseful pause before the gathering storm. The office was drowned in that cold, bluish light that buzzes faintly from the overhead fluorescence, steady, unrelenting, almost cruel in its impersonality. Lena sat alone at her desk, the screen's glow casting sharp shadows beneath her glasses while the envelope at her side, now opened, seemed to pulse with silent menace. The letter's words haunted her, snippets of memories that weren't hers, secrets whispered in handwriting she recognized but couldn't claim, tearing through the fabric of her understanding. Each flutter of paper carried an ache she couldn't place, a tremor in the very foundation of her identity. Her coworkers moved in ghostly silence past the glass walls, their glances a mix of pity and curiosity. Whispers echoed without sound, rumors threading themselves like vines, suffocating every attempt at normalcy. Her phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. Heart hammering, she swiped cautiously. The text was a cryptic warning: "They know you're looking. Be careful." A chill raced down her spine, a whisper of threat or perhaps a plea for caution. Tension built like static electricity around her as she pieced together minor details gleaned from the shadows, an odd phrase in the letter matching an email from a colleague, a name whispered among desk chatter, a meeting room reluctantly booked and then abruptly cancelled. The puzzle was jagged, incomplete but insistently beckoning. Yet the deeper she dug, the more unsteady her footing became. Mistakes crept into her work, minor at first but growing more noticeable. Errors in reports that were once flawless. The flickering fluorescent above buzzed louder as a stray paper slipped from her fingers, swirling to the floor like a fallen leaf in a tempest. Her reflection, caught in the dark glass of the conference room, doubled and distorted by smudges and flickering lights, seemed a Strangera woman unraveling between worlds. That evening, the flickering street lamp outside her apartment guttered, casting long, jittering shadows across the walls. The letter on her kitchen table was joined by a second, identical handwriting revealing truths that chilled her breath away. Fear, sharp and hollow, seeped through her veins. A knock at the door startled her too early, uncertain. She opened it to find a friend, wide-eyed and pale, clutching a similar letter. "I've been getting these too," she confessed, voice trembling. "We need to talk." Together, they sat in the dim light, the letters between them tightening unseen bonds yet fraying the trust they once shared. What started as investigation spiraled into paranoia. Whispers of conspiracy, shadows flickering at the edge of sight. The dividing line between ally and enemy blurred frighteningly. "Who can we trust?" Lena's voice cracked, a raw edge breaking through her brittle exterior. Her friend offered no easy answer, only a haunted look before the room plunged into silence and then darkness as the power flickered out, the hiss of the failing light swallowed by the blank blackness. The camera lingered on Lena's face, eyes wide and searching, swimming in shadows, as the faintest hint of a smile, secret, sinister, or perhaps just a glimmer of determination played at the corners of her lips. The night pressed close, the silence heavy and pregnant with unspoken dread. The story had twisted, the game changed, and Lena stood at the cusp, breathing the cold air of uncertainty, haunted and alive, caught in a web that stretched far beyond her fragile grasp. The worn fabric of her blouse clung to her damp skin as Lena sat on the edge of the bed, the shadows stretching long and uneasy across the dimly lit room. Outside, the storm brought a relentless soundtrack of wind and rain battering the fragile glass, each gust reverberating through the walls and thudding against her racing heartbeat. The room felt smaller than ever, its silence heavy with the weight of truths she could barely face. In her shaking hands, she held another letter, the same aged paper, the same haunting script arranged in her own handwriting, yet pulsing with sinister familiarity. Each word seemed to erode the already fragile reality she clung to. Names she trusted now whispered betrayal. Memories she cherished twisted into questions that slashed at her sense of self. Earlier that day, the confrontation had shattered what remained of her certainty. Her closest friend, the one she'd leaned on through dark nights and uncertain mornings, revealed she too had been receiving letters. Their shared terror morphed overnight into suspicion, the fragile threads of friendship snapping under the crushing weight of fear. "I didn't want to believe it was real," her friend had whispered, eyes wide, voice breaking under the strain of burgeoning doubt. "But this isn't just targeting you. It's targeting us." That shared moment, once a bomb, now felt like the final fracture, a mirror reflecting Lena's deepest dread. She was no longer alone, yet utterly isolated. Betrayal was not lurking in some anonymous dark. It had worn the faces of those she trusted. Her gaze fell to the broken ring lying on the nightstand, its fractured circle symbolizing not only lost love but now fractured truths. The metallic glint caught the flickering bulb's weak light, casting ghostly shadows that danced like specters across the walls, a tormenting reminder of the fractures threatening to consume her. Trembling, the fingers that had once carefully guarded every fragment of her existence now trembled with uncertainty. The room's flickering lights matched her faltering resolve, the darkness encroaching, reality bending in unsettling waves. She reached for the fading photograph resting beneath the letters, an image of herself, smiling in a place she could not remember. The corners of the photo curled, an echo of forgotten moments and distorted memories. The sight sent a cold shiver down her spine, unraveling the familiar thread of identity. Her breath hitched. The reflection in the cracked mirror above the dresser wavered. Her eyes locked with her own, but behind the glass, the smile that greeted her was not hers. It was colder, knowing, and infinitely more dangerous. A sudden noise, footsteps hesitant on the staircase, snapped Lena from her stunned silence. Her heart pounded in her throat as shadows pooled at the threshold, and the door creaked, revealing the outline of a figure whose face she could not make out. "You need to stop." The voice was low, urgent, trembling with guilt and fear. "This is bigger than us." Words hung suspended, the tension in the room so thick it pressed against her skin. The room seemed to pulse with the dark undercurrent of a truth that twisted and turned beyond her control. Lena's eyes burned with a fierce clarity born of desperation. "Who?" Her voice cracked but carried a shard of defiance. "Who is doing this?" Silence answered her, thick and suffocating, as the flickering light plunged the room briefly into darkness before returning with a cold, clinical glow. The unknown smiled just beyond the edge of vision, a cruel promise lurking in the shadows. Clarity and terror collided in Lena's Gazeta road ahead, blurred, dangerous, but sharply defined by this awakening. The enemy was not a phantom but flesh and blood, close enough to touch. And the fight for her identity, her very self, had only just begun. The scene faded on the fractured mirror, Lena's distorted reflection looming large, a haunting emblem of a battle waged both within and beyond the invisible walls of reality. A suffocating silence hung over the room, broken only by the faint, steady drip of water leaking from the ceiling above, a slow, agonizing rhythm that marked the passing of irreversible moments. Lena sat crumpled on the worn sofa in her darkened living room, the pale glow of distant streetlights throwing angular shadows against the peeling walls. Thick curtains, relentlessly drawn, swallowed what little light tried to escape the night beyond. Her tiny frame was swallowed beneath an oversized cardigan, her knees pulled close to her chest in a fragile defense against the cold and the encroaching void inside. Her round glasses, coated faintly with condensation, reflected flickering images from the dying TV screen, warped and unreal, like the world itself unraveling before her. The sting of betrayal twisted deep inside her, a cruel ache sharper than any physical pain. The trust she'd once placed in those close to her now severed, shattered like shards of broken glass glinting with harsh light on a cracked floor. The letters she'd found, eerie and insidious, had exposed a darkness creeping innocuously into the fabric of her life, distorting reality and undermining her sense of self. Outside, a storm raged. Autumn winds howled past with ghostly moans, rattling the window panes, the bare branches scraping like skeletal fingers against the glass. Rain hammered the roof with relentless fury, echoing the pounding of her heart, a chaotic drumbeat marking the disintegration of her world. Her eyes, dulled by sleepless nights and suffused with sadness, fixed on the cracked mirror that hung crookedly across the room. In its fractured reflection, Lena saw herself fragmented not just in image but in soul. A pale, fragile girl staring back, lost in the shadows of her own unraveling mind. Her lips parted, a breath escaping into the cold air, a whispered question without answer. Who am I anymore? The letter, now folded and creased, lay forgotten on the cluttered coffee table, a symbol not of hope, but of an unraveling thread leading her ever deeper into confusion and despair. Silence returned, more oppressive than the storm outside, as if the very walls were closing in, providing no solace, no salvation. The weight of isolation pressed in on her, dragging her down toward an abyss where even the faintest light dared not linger. She curled tighter, shivering beneath the heavy shadows, her breath shallow, her heartbeat thudding in desolate rhythm. A single tear traced a cold path down her cheek, catching the flickering glow of a candle struggling against the darkness. The storm intensified, lightning briefly illuminating the room in stark white, cutting the darkness with harsh brilliance only to leave it darker still when the flash faded. In that flash of light, Lena glimpsed not herself but an unfamiliar reflection in the mirror, a smile she did not know, an eye that watched her with quiet menace. Her breath caught, the fragile veil between truth and nightmare thinning. The scene faded in heavy, consuming darkness as the rain's relentless tattoo drowned out all other sound, the visual of Lena, small and trembling, consumed by shadows both in the room and within. A world unraveling. A self dissolving. The crisis had deeply rooted itself in her soul. The walls of Lena's apartment seemed to contract, closing in with suffocating weight as shadows ebbed and flowed beneath the cold flicker of a dying overhead light. The room was swallowed by a darkness deeper than night, pierced only by the pale glow of the street lamp slicing through the cracked blinds, a solitary beam casting fractured lines that splintered across her pale face. Lena sat huddled on the threadbare sofa, her body curled inwards as though trying to hold together the pieces unraveling inside her. The air was thick with the scent of damp fabric and stale air, punctuated by the barely audible drip of water from a faulty pipe echoing down the hollow spaces, a slow metronome marking the passage of disintegration. Her glasses hung slightly askew, fogged and smeared with fingerprints, the lenses reflecting the faint, ghostly shimmer of a letter laid open on the worn coffee table. The ink on the paper seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive with the warnings and betrayals penned in her own handwords that had once promised understanding but now only deepened the fissures of forgotten truths. Outside, a cold wind howled low through the skeletal branches of barren trees, brushing against the windowpane with whispers of forgotten secrets. The flickering streetlight outside trembled, its cadence matching the fragile instability of Lena's drinking breath. Each gust seemed to carry a spectral presence, unseen yet palpably near, stirring the curtains like restless shadows trying to breach the fragile sanctuary she clung to. Her hands, pale and trembling, reached for the cracked mirror hanging askew on the wall, a silent sentinel to a fractured identity. In its fractured reflection, Lena's eyes stared back, wide and hollowed, searching for a self that had slipped beyond her grasp. The fragile smile that tried to bloom on her lips vanished as her reflection distorted into something unrecognizable, a stranger's visage grinning coldly back at her. A single, brittle laugh escaped from her throat, more a breath than sound dissolving quickly into the thick silence. Her body shook beneath the crushing emptiness like a fragile leaf in a relentless storm. The weight of betrayal, the decay of trust, and the unraveling of her own mind pressed heavily against her chest, constricting each faltering breath. Near her feet, the broken ring, a token of love once shared, rested on the scuffed floorboards, its fractured circle shimmering faintly in the candlelight's ghostly glow, a cruel emblem of a heart fragmented beyond repair. The room seemed to hold its breath as Lena's gaze fell to the letter once more. Her voice, barely audible and laden with despair, whispered into the void, "Who am I now?" No answer came, only the mournful drip of water and the soft rustle of night creatures beyond the glass. The flickering light finally succumbed, plunging the apartment into suffocating darkness, and Lena slumped entirely into the embracing void, a solitary figure swallowed by shadows. The scene closed on her silhouette, still and broken, the faint outline of her breath misting in the cold Ira, haunting testament to a soul teetering on the brink of oblivion, lost between what was and what might never be reclaimed. The pale, citrine light of dawn spilled unevenly across the disorder of Lena's apartment, casting long, sorrowful shadows that clung to every surface. The room was a hushed sanctuary of quiet desperation, peeling wallpaper, scattered papers, the remnants of a life unraveling. Lena sat heavily in the worn armchair by the window, her figure diminished beneath the aching weight of unraveling certainty. Her fingers fidgeted, picking absent-mindedly at a frayed thread on the armrest, a restless, tiny act holding the fragile line between despair and resistance. Outside, the early morning breeze stirred the fluttering curtains, carrying distant sounds of a world already abuzz and unaware of the slow collapse within these walls. A cracked mirror perched silently on an adjacent wall caught the faint light, reflecting shards of her fragmented self, a face worn thin by fear and deceit, eyes swollen but alight now with a fleeting, fragile glimmer. On the battered coffee table, the first letter rested, that ominous script, her own handwriting inscribed in cryptic sentences that had thrown her into this consuming spiral. But tonight, beneath the scrawl, she found something new. A delicate crease revealed an enigmatic annotation, barely legible but pulsating with promise. It pointed toward a forgotten name, a potential clue overlooked in her frantic search. The room's shadows flickered as the light danced in rhythmic, uncertain patterns, echoing the unstable reality Lena struggled to grasp. A single breath escaped her lips, soft and deliberate. Maybe this is not the end," she whispered, her voice cracking, fragile but tethered to an ember of hope. Her gaze drifted toward the broken ring she wore, catching a shard of sunlight that fragmented into prismatic sparks. This once broken symbol now felt like a talisman, a testament not just to fractures endured, but to the possibility of wholeness regained. Suddenly, a soft creak came from the hallway, the familiar, unassuming sound of her dog settling at the door. Echo's calm presence seeped into the room, a loyal pulse of warmth amidst the cold currents of uncertainty. His steady breathing and slow eyelids comforted her, rooting her back from the abyss. Her fingers closed slowly around the letter, clutching it as if gathering scattered pieces of a rebirth. A faint smile, almost imperceptible, ghosted across her face, a quiet defiance, a fragile phoenix stirring beneath ash. The camera lingered on the delicate flicker of the bedroom light, as the first rays of dawn crept across broken surfaces, illuminating not destruction, but the stirring of renewal. The narrative poised at this moment of fragile awakening, where the abyss recedes just enough to offer a glimpse of the path back. As Lena's eyes locked once more with her reflection in the fractured mirror, the fleeting image of another smile, sinister, knowing, not her own, teased the edges of reality, and the screen faded to black. A heartbeat held in the silence, the threshold crossed between despair and hope. The first light of dawn seeped softly through the partially drawn blinds, casting a gentle, golden hue across Lena's disordered apartment. The air was thick with a tentative sense of renewal, and unspoken promise that the storm she had weathered was beginning to ebb. Shadows still clung to the corners, flickering faintly as the aging street lamp outside struggled against the morning gloom, its dim glow fractured by the lingering night. Lena sat motionless in the center of her small room on a battered armchair. Her curled hands rested quietly, betraying a subtle tremor, an almost imperceptible sign of the fragile awakening stirring within her. Her dark, curly hair was tied loosely in a bun, strands escaping and framing her face in a chaotic halo, mirroring her internal chaos. In her lap, an old, crumpled letter was cradled like fragile glass. Its ink was slightly smudged from trembling fingertips. She stared at the words, which had haunted her for days, now seeming less like a threat and more like an invitation, an echo of truth buried beneath layers of her own denial. The morning sun flickered against the worn walls, illuminating the forgotten symbols of her past, frayed photographs and a broken ring, silent witnesses to her journey. The ring's jagged edges caught the light faintly, a symbol of fractured love and the hope of mending what once seemed irreparably shattered. A soft, almost hesitant breath escaped her lips. She reached out slowly, fingers trembling as she brushed the paper, feeling the textured indentations, tiny scars carved in ink, truths carved in silence. The act of touching the letter was a deliberate step, no longer just a discovery, but a conscious decision to face what lurked beneath her subconscious. Her gaze drifted to the window, where the hazy outline of the world outside seemed calmer, even in its muted hues. The early morning quiet seeped into her, filling the empty spaces with a faint whisper of possibility. There was warmth in that light, the promise of a new day, of the slow return of clarity amid chaos. For a moment, she closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The rising sun poured across her shoulders, a soft reassurance that even in darkness, hope flickers, fragile, yet persistent. Her mind whispered softly, perhaps this is the beginning. Perhaps I can reclaim the pieces of myself I thought I'd lost. The camera lingered on her face, a delicate portrait of tentative resolve, eyes glistening yet unyielding. Her face reflected the dawn's light, a fragile mirror of inner awakening. The shadows retreat, the darkness recedes, leaving behind a hint of warmth, a whisper of renewal. She rose slowly, the slight creak of the worn wooden floor breaking the silence. Her silhouette against the golden glow was a symbol of possible redemption, a figure at the threshold of transformation. The day awaited, uncertain but filled with promise. As she moved toward the window, the battered frame framing her in a halo of soft light, her reflection caught for one fleeting moment. A new resolve ignited within her, a delicate ember that refused to be snuffed out. In that quiet, cinematic pause, Lena understood that change was a fragile, tentative step, still far from stabilization, yet undeniably begun. The dawn cast a fragile glow through the cracked window, casting faint streaks of light into Lena's cluttered room. Shadows still clung stubbornly to the corners, like remnants of her past struggles, yet something within her had shifted, an ember ignited after nights of despair. She stood slowly, the ache in her joints a dull reminder of her recent collapse, but her gaze was sharper, more deliberate. In her trembling hands, she held the torn remnants of the letters, shattered, burnt, yet symbolically infused with the power to forge new beginnings. With a fierce, slow breath, Lena reached for the small box of matches on her cluttered desk. The air was thick with anticipation, the cool morning air pressing against her skin as she finally made her decision. The flames flickered to life, casting erratic shadows that danced across her face and the worn floor. Her eyes widened, fixed on the flickering light, as she watched the letters curl and blacken under the fire, each flicker a step away from despair, each ash a step toward reclaiming her identity. A quiet resolve settled over her, a whisper of hope amid the smoke and chaos. The act of burning was not just destruction. It was a ritual, an act of courage to release what had haunted her, to forge space for renewal. Her fingertips trembled but stayed steady as she watched the last of the flames consume the remnants, her face illuminated by the dying glow. She stepped back, the shadows retreating as a sense of clarity washed over her, thick and resolute. The flickering fire mirrored the fragile yet fierce affirmation. She was reclaiming her story, piece by piece. Her reflection in the smoky glass door showed a woman reborn, eyes steady, spine straight, an unspoken vow etched into her expression. Outside, the first true light of dawn broke free from the horizon, spilling golden hues over the world outside and over her purpose. The storm of doubts, like the unread letters, had been reduced to ashes, leaving behind only the embers of a new resolve. The camera focused on Lena's face as she turned away from the smoldering remnants, stepping into the emerging daylight, a symbol of the hesitant but unstoppable rebirth of her spirit. The scene lingered, capturing her silhouette framed by the breaking light, the silhouette of a woman who had faced her darkness and begun to walk toward the dawn. The room, once cloaked in shadows and whispered doubts, now blooms with a radiant dawn. Sunlight streams through a cracked window, casting a golden glow that dances across Lena's face, a luminous testament to her awakening. Her posture, once bowed under the weight of despair, now stands tall. Her shoulders are squared, her gaze unwavering, as if this moment signifies the silent birth of a new, unbreakable resolve. On the worn desk in front of her, every clue she'd collected, every whisper of the past, now seems to pulse with renewed purpose. The strings of her complicated history, once tangled and woven with paranoia, are slowly unraveling to reveal the resilient core of her true self. Her hand reaches out deliberately, not to hold a letter, but to gently touch a small, smooth stone resting there, a symbol of her strength, enduring and unshakable. She tilts her head, eyes closing briefly, savoring the subtle warmth, the promise of victory that had once seemed so distant. The flicker of the candle on the window sill, its flame flickering yet resilient, mirrors her own persistence. Her breath steadies, calm, deliberate, echoing a quiet defiance. The room is alive with a renewed energy, a silent symphony of hope and clarity. The shadows retreat, dissolved by the dawn's radiant light, as Lena's face becomes a mirror of her inner rebirth. The dark reds that haunted her, symbolic of her fears and the unseen force, have faded into the background, replaced by a luminous, steady glow of resolve. In that moment, she turns slowly toward the mirror on the wall, her reflection poised with silent conviction. Her eyes, once fogged with doubt, now gleam with clarity, ready. Her posture, upright and confident, is not just a gesture but a declaration. She has reclaimed her narrative. The camera pulls back to frame her silhouette against the sun-filled window, a sacred moment of transformation, of resilience reborn from the ashes of chaos. The wind stirs the curtains lightly, welcoming this new chapter, as the final visual lingers on the serene steadiness of her face, a symbolic testament to the victory over darkness. The scene fades, leaving an enduring image of hope and silent promise, an unspoken vow that even in the deepest shadows, the light can be reborn. In the quiet glow of the late afternoon, Lena sat alone in her modest living room, a gentle stillness settling like dawn after a long storm. The room, once shadowed and riddled with echoes of chaos, now shimmered with a soft, comforting light that spilled through the windows, bathing the space in hues of amber and muted pink. Every surface reflected a subtle piece, mementos of her journey, scattered but no longer broken, lay carefully arranged across the shelves and tables. Her hands rested gently on her lap, fingers intertwined, as her eyes traced the contours of the room, faint cracks in the wall, the worn fabric of her favorite chair, a small photo frame of herself and her son, captured in a rare moment of pure laughter. The fractured mirror, once a symbol of uncertainty and chaos, now sat polished and clear, a reflection of her own transformation. Outside, the world was slow to stir, but a new rhythm pulsed, the gentle hum of life returning to the small town, quiet and persistent. Birds murmured in the distance, and the faint rustle of leaves created a calming symphony, echoing her inner harmony. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lena felt grounded, her breath slow and steady, the tumult inside finally quiet. She reached toward the table, where the last remaining letters, remnants of her fears and their origins, lay safely in a glass box. But now, instead of fear, they shimmered with a different meaning, a testament to resilience. Her fingers hovered over the glass, hesitating, then gently pressed down, closing her eyes for a moment of silent gratitude. A warm smile touched her lips, fragile yet genuine, as she brushed her fingertips across her reflection in the window, her own eyes, not haunted but peaceful, stared back with an unspoken understanding. Her journey, once fraught with shadows and uncertainty, had led her Hurrian acceptance of what was, and a quiet hope for what could be. The scene lingered on this moment of serenity, Lena sitting serenely, surrounded by symbols of her strength, the fading light casting a soft glow upon her. The world outside continued slowly turning, the dusk settling gently, but within her, a gentle dawn was breaking in, awakening to the truth that she had fought so hard to reclaim. As the screen faded to black, the last image was her silhouette against the window, a silent testament to the resilience of the spirit, anchored, steady, ready for whatever new journey awaited, with a quiet, unshakable peace. The soft glow of twilight spilled into Lena's space, casting a warm hue over the remnants of chaos that had once consumed her. She knelt near the ashes of the letters, now reduced to smoldering fragments that curled and faded into nothingness. The once oppressive shadows that haunted her moments ago had receded, replaced by a gentle calm that seeped into her bones, an unspoken acceptance settling like dawn after a night of darkness. She paused, her hand gently resting on the warm, cracked earth, feeling the pulse of life beneath her own heartbeat, steady and sure. Around her, the garden bloomed quietly, resilient, unbothered by the storm of her fears. The broken ring she'd worn, symbol of fractured love, lay beside her, its sharp edges softened, no longer a symbol of loss but of renewal. In the distance, the first stars blinked alive, twinkling softly in a sky painted with streaks of lavender and gold, a canvas of hope and reconciliation. She took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs, anchoring her to the present. Her eyes closed, a faint, tentative smile curling at the corners of her lips in acknowledgement that she had reclaimed her narrative. Her fingers brushed the charred remains of the letters, remnants of her past fears turned to ash. With deliberate grace, she reached for a lighter, a simple act, but one charged with symbolic meaning. The flames flickered briefly, then consumed the last traces of her torment, leaving behind only glowing embers braided with resilience and rebirth. As the fire waned, Lena's face illuminated by the fading glow, she looked into the mirror of her soul, clear, unclouded, determined. The reflection that stared back was no longer that haunted, fractured woman, but a resilient spirit reborn through pain and love, ready to face whatever new dawn awaited. The scene widened to show her silhouette standing amidst the blooming garden, bathed in the golden embrace of twilight. Her posture was upright, a silent testament to the inner strength forged anew. A gust of wind stirred the leaves, whispering promises of peace, healing, and the continuation of her journey. In this moment of quiet triumph, she closed her eyes and let the tranquility wash over her, each breath a vow of serenity, each heartbeat a chapter closed and a new story beginning. The camera lingered on her serene face before slowly fading to black, a lasting image of hope distilled into a silent, eternal promise. The silent dawn stretched across the horizon, spilling a gentle light that brushed softly over Lena's quiet home, a sanctuary reclaimed. The shadows lingered at the edges of the room, but they no longer held dominion, only remnants of the chaos she had endured. The air was imbued with a profound stillness, a peace that descended like a tapestry woven from acceptance and quiet hope. Within her, a subtle transformation had quietly taken root. Her shoulders, once hunched from fear, now sat squarely, unburdened by the weight of unseen darkness. Her eyes, once wide with dread, gazed softly at her reflection in the mirror, an image no longer fractured, but whole, a testament to resilience. A worn, broken ring lay resting on the windowsill, now bathed in the warm glow of early morning light. It shimmered, a silent emblem of a journey from despair to understanding, from fractured past to unbroken future. Its jagged edges were no longer symbols of pain but of endurance, of the power to piece life back together once more. Outside, the world was awakening in muted hues shivered slightly in a whisper of breeze. The distant hum of life reasserted itself, slow and steady, unyielding. And within this tranquil scene, Lena felt the distant echo of a breath long held, an inner peace that had so often seemed unreachable now quietly embraced her. She moved to the window, pressing her hand gently against the glass, and looked out upon the quiet streets bathed in gauzy morning light. The wind played softly with her curls, a gentle caress that symbolized the renewal she'd fought so hard to claim. For a moment, she closed her eyes, sensing the faint, persistent pulse of hope that refused to dissipate. The shadows behind her began to recede, replaced by a luminous calm that shimmered in her spirit. Her expression softened, a subtle, unspoken smile forming an acceptance of the past and a tentative embrace of the future. The mirror's reflection caught her completely an unguarded moment of peace, a silent testament that she was no longer lost. The camera lingered on her silhouette, now framed against the dawn's gentle glow, a visual metaphor for restored clarity. Her hand lingered on the windowsill, fingertips tracing the smooth edge of the piece she had fought to reclaim. In that silent, cinematic pause, she understood that the shadows may always linger at the edges of her reality. She had found her true center. Finally, the scene faded away, leaving only the quiet hum of the morning and the endless horizon of possibilities ahead, a symbol of hope, eternal and unshakable, in the stillness of a new beginning. Ever found something unexplainable? Share your mystery moments below.